morning. Welcome to day 2. Some of our shoe game is really strong, at least 2 of us.
The pressure is so high with the shoes now.
Good morning. Really excited to be here with you. My name is Madison. I'm VP of Partnerships at the Tech Talent Project. And it was actually just about 5 years ago that I was sitting out in the audience as an employee of the state of Vermont. And we had just come off of a really hard few years with our health insurance exchange. We were getting ready to kick up our integrated benefits work. And it was really Code for America that opened our eyes to new ways of working, that showed us that something different was possible. And like every government transformation project, it was 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But we really wouldn't have been able to accomplish what we were able to accomplish without Code for America and all the other civic tech organizations that welcomed us into this community with open arms. And I never would have thought that I would have the chance to be up here on stage with such an amazing group of panelists that are leading this work all across the country. So today we're going to focus on the unique moment that we have in states and all the transformations happening across the country. And over the last 24 hours, you've heard a lot of stories of what's happening on the ground. But this morning, we're going to focus on what's possible when a state's executive leadership is aligned around the importance of building digital capacity and investing in the talent that it takes to deliver and do this work well. So this conversation builds on one that started when Tech Talent Project partnered with several organizations, including American Enterprise Institute, New America, and the Beck Center for Social Impact and Innovation at Georgetown. We brought together nearly 150 nonprofit and government experts from across the country to publish a series of memos focused on what states can do in the first 200 days of 2023 to increase their digital capacity. So there's 9 memos in total. I'll try to list them. There's 4 foundational memos on talent, procurement, data, and cybersecurity. And then there's a series of program area memos on things like child welfare, unemployment insurance, integrated benefits, education data systems, et cetera. And we focused on the first 200 days of this year as a critical period of time for governors to act with urgency, to deliver the momentum they need to deliver effectively for their entire term. And so this looks like acting quickly to implement human-centered best practices and then working to bring diverse, empathetic, modern tech leaders into their administrations. So today we're on day 137, I believe. And so we want to talk about how states are doing. So with us, we have Cecilia Muñoz and John Bailey, who were co-chairs on the memo project. They both have amazingly impressive bios. We can't list everything that you've accomplished today. But so for our purposes, know that Cecilia is a key advisor for New America's New Practice Lab and led the Domestic Policy Council under President Obama. And John is a non-resident fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and served as special assistant to the president for domestic policy for George W. Bush. And we're also joined with Cabinet Secretary for Human Services in the state of Oklahoma, Justin Brown, and Secretary of IT for the state of Maryland, Katie Savage. Thank you all so much for being here. So let's dive right in. Cecilia, let's start with you. So our audience here shares this commitment to transforming the way government delivers services. Why is it so important to focus on states, and what's unique about this moment right now?
So they handed me a microphone. One of these is working. And it's this one. So first of all, thank you for doing this, and I'm excited to be on this panel with all of you and with all of you. This is a really pivotal moment in states, really for 3 reasons, and I'll be quick about it. One is that I think the pandemic really exposed how bad it can be when states don't succeed in delivering vital benefits, services to people. I think the failure of UI, unemployment insurance in a lot of states, in a moment when a lot of people lost their jobs during the pandemic, really sort of drove that home. And so I think it created a new sense of urgency, and that we're all hopefully in a position to capitalize on. I think a second thing, and you will see it richly in my fellow panelists here, is that there is new leadership in a lot of states that are capitalizing on this sense of urgency, and they're doing it in really smart, really effective ways, which you're going to hear about. And then I think the third thing is that this movement has ripened a lot. And so for a state that is eager to find talented people who are interested in transforming how they deliver services, those people are there to be found. And there are organizations like Tech Talent and Code for America, and New America is involved in this as well, that are both building that pipeline and making sure people are prepared and able to take on those roles and do it in really effective ways.
Excellent, thank you. John, when we think about how change is driven, it can be top down, it can be bottom up. When you're thinking about transforming institutions, a lot of people might say you need both. But why do you think it's so important to engage governors' offices and agency secretaries in this work, and how do you do it effectively?
Gosh, well, thank you. Thanks to all of you in this room, and for not just attending this, but for what you're doing every single day. It's a great question. It's not just change from the bottom up and from the top down, but from the outside in. And I think that's what most of you have also represented, is that you can help push transformation efforts from the outside to get governors to think differently, to think cabinet agencies to think differently. It's so important because governors and executive officers, they set the agendas, they set the policy priorities, they allocate the budgets, and then most critically, they also are responsible for the personnel. And personnel in all the different facets, from who they hire and making sure that we have top-notch tech talent in senior roles so that they're co-designing the policy as it's going, not just implementing it on the other side. But also engaging groups like yourself and U.S. Digital Services and just other folks and helping to sort of bring that talent to bear. But it's so critical because, again, it's not just implementing existing state services, but right now you have $2 trillion from the Infrastructure Act, from the CHIPS Act, and from the IRA. All these are going to governors. They have to set priorities in terms of broadband funding, who should get funding in underserved areas and underserved areas. They have to make allocations with a whole bunch of different type of tech and data needs. And so it's so critical to make sure that governors are getting the best tech talent and the best tech advice to make sure they're making the best decisions and helping to serve the most people possible.
Thanks, John. Secretary Brown, let's toss it to you. So in Oklahoma, you've been a passionate advocate and spokesperson for human-centered and trauma-informed service delivery. And there's times when that conversation can be cast as partisan, but I think you have a really different view on that. Can you share a little bit about your perspective and how you think this work can be a force that unites and rather than divides the country?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And I'll be the fourth person to say thank you all for being here and for Code for putting this on and Tech Talent. But so I serve in the human services space primarily, and with interconnected systems. So human services for me is the most important system in our nation and our state. That we serve the most vulnerable Oklahomans and Americans. And for me, the system of human services is attempting to move from transactions to relationships. That's the key piece here. We are driven today by transactional outputs rather than relational outcomes. And so for us, there's a couple of components around that that's important to sort of anchor us in that. One is I believe the benefits programs should be the front door for government to build a trust-filled relationship with those that we serve so that we can not only solve for basic needs, but we can also put you or help you find a pathway to exit multi-generational poverty. That's the big picture for us. We have to start with a foundational culture that is sort of to some of these questions. It's human-centered, and the culture should be human-centered as a nation in human services. It should be outcomes-focused. It should be relationship-based, and it should be trauma-informed and hope-centered. Those are the four sort of primary components for me in a contemporary human services system. So when you start to bring those together, the idea that specifically in the current conversation, the SNAP program is the way that we build trust so that we can get folks onto a pathway out of multi-generational poverty. You start to be able to break down the partisan political barriers that exist because that resonates. The goal of the system is to empower you to lift your own family out of poverty to reach the goals that you have for yourselves. And those pathways, of course, the sort of long-term pathways are adult education and career pathways, but we know that so many of the people that we serve can't yet engage in those pathways. So we have to create others like health and mental health and substance abuse to get you on the pathway out of poverty. So as we start to frame the sort of future of human services around the idea of exiting multi-generational poverty, you can also start to talk about that as an investment, right? So these systems, specifically benefit systems, allow us to open the front door, and for us to really look at them as an investment that we should be expected to receive a return on over time. And I actually believe we can. When we invest in families, we're going to see long-term, multi-generational impact to our economics. So you can both do the right thing for people and do the right thing for taxpayers at the same time. And that's what we have to be framing our systems around.
That's a great frame. Secretary Savage, one of the goals of our collective work is to document and share learnings so that states that are earlier in their digital journeys can, get started more quickly, maybe avoid some of the pitfalls that some of the rest of us have experienced. So before joining the Moore administration, you spent about 5 years in leadership at Defense Digital Service. So can you share a little bit about the learnings that you've brought forward, particularly in the team building and talent, that have allowed you to be more effective in your first few months?
Sure. So I've done technology. I've been a technologist now at all 3 levels of government. I started in the office of Mayor Rahm Emanuel in Chicago, then as Cass mentioned, the office of the Secretary of Defense at DoD, and now as part of Governor Moore's administration. And there's at least three aspects of lessons that I want to make sure to capture and share with other states and my own team as I step into this new role. The first, as we started this panel, is alignment with your administration. You really need to be really clear that when everything is a technology implementation, you could go 1,000 different ways, there's 1,000 different priorities. So you need to be really clear with leadership, in the 4 years that they're an elected official, what do they want to get done? Is it a Health and Human Services portal? Is it eGov services? So having that clear alignment, especially as a CIO, is really critical because you want to know where to focus your time and energy because it could be 1,000 different things. So that's one. The second is not just hiring more the junior level, but making sure that you have good technology leadership at the sort of managerial level. What I've seen time and again is we focus on trying to fill developer roles or sort of more junior engineering roles, and those are really important. But those people, if you spend a lot of time recruiting, I think we oftentimes tend to focus on recruiting those people, and they're what makes the systems run, what makes the systems tick. But if you don't have managers who understand technology, those people will just get frustrated and leave because they're not getting sort of clear direction or guidance on how to do their jobs well. So one important lesson that I've learned is to even as you're building the more junior workforce, you're also thinking about who is that more senior level that can give direction to those people. And then the third thing I would say is bringing the talent in-house. In talking to some of my fellow CIOs at the state level, a lot of us oversee major IT contracts, and oftentimes there's perfectly appropriate at times to bring in contractor support, especially given state resources. But sometimes I see us giving huge contracts to companies when all we really need is a security engineer in-house who could quickly say yes, no, we feel good about the security of this application. So rather than, we need to make sure that we're bringing some of that talent in-house, whether it's product managers, UX, UI, engineering support, so that we can make those decisions. Sometimes we build what we can buy and we buy what we can build. And when we bring that expertise in-house, we can make those decisions to more appropriately manage what we're doing internally versus what we're outsourcing.
Thank you so much. Great points there. So a question for the whole panel. You all have slightly different perspectives on what's going on out there in states based on the work you're doing. So what's going on out there that you think is working really well right now or that's giving you hope as we look at the first few months of this year? And anyone can jump in.
I'll jump in and say I've heard the word customer experience more in the last few months than I have previously in my career. I used to have to, especially going back a decade ago, so the time in the city of Chicago, it seemed crazy at the time to some people that we would want to shadow various government departments, especially who wants to see the underbelly of the Department of Water Management or Department of Transportation. But now it's more commonly accepted that we're going to be journey mapping, we're going to be shadowing, we're going to be whiteboarding, we're sort of whether the customer is a city or state resident, or it's internally, we're sort of figuring out how to improve process or workflow for our agency staff. We're one, defining those personas, and Justin talks about this really well. We're defining those personas, and then we're trying to get in their heads, and that's something that we really had to fight for a decade ago. So I'm really excited that that's top of mind.
I love that.
So it won't surprise you that the human services guy is going to come with something about people. So what excites me and gives me hope is that there are there's an array of leaders in human services, health and human services and interconnected systems across the country that I'm not sure have always sort of been there. And those leaders bring empathy, but they bring strength. They've gone through an incredible period of disruption over the last few years. Everyone in this room has, but when you lead these, some of the biggest systems in the country, and you come out on the other side with a system that is probably better than it was before. It empowers not only you as a leader, but also in Oklahoma, our team of 6,000 incredible employees at the Oklahoma Department of Human Services. They are committed and ready to go, and I think they're somewhat recharging a little bit. It's been taxing, of course. It's been very, very difficult, but there is a workforce and a group of leaders who are primed and in great position to leverage some of the concepts that we talk about here, that Katie just talked about around human-centered design, and really sort of reframing the way that government operates to be much more focused on outcomes for the people we serve.
So I'm a policy nerd, so for me, while I think it's tremendously important and exciting that states have really begun to figure out that it's about kind of bringing the skill sets of technologists into the delivery set of questions, we're also beginning to make inroads in understanding that the skill sets of technologists, and I talk skill sets particularly because this is not just about technology, right? It's about what we know how to do and bring. That's also beginning to enter the policy conversation, right? So we don't just need these skill sets when we're delivering a thing that the policy nerds have gone and designed, but in fact, we are beginning to have a conversation about designing the policy itself with these skill sets at the table.
Maybe 4 very quick things. First, you all give me hope. The fact that we have this many people in the room and that you are working on some of the most pressing challenges in helping governments modernize their services for people, that gives me hope. Second, I come back to there's just so much federal funds right now that are going out to states that, again, to do various types of public services, from broadband to a lot of climate tech programs, but a lot of that can also be a catalyst for digital modernization programs in states. So just looking for the right tech leadership. And that's the third, is that I'm just seeing more governors right now setting up digital service offices. They're hiring people differently. Again, it's slow momentum, but it's growing momentum, and that's super important. And then lastly, I think it's really hard not to play with some of these AI tools. Like the more you're playing with ChatGPT, I've just been using for the last 2 weeks Code Interpreter, and you just kind of get a glimpse of, again, we should have a robust conversation about AI making decisions, but maybe it can remove a lot of the friction in terms of how the public engages with different types of government services and just engages with information. And so I think there's a lot of room there for a sandbox to just sort of play with what are different ways for us to remove friction and make government work better for people, or just make it a better user experience is there as well.
Thank you, John. So we just have a little over a minute left, but we want to do a call to action. Hundreds of technologists and civic tech curious folks at Code for America. Looking at the year ahead, how should the organizations and individuals who are interested in helping states, how should they be engaging? What could they be doing the rest of this year to help states accelerate their progress? We'll just do rapid fire.
Well, for me, in the final 53 seconds, I would say that you should please just give us a chance. The human services and interconnected systems have been sort of a black box to access, and so there's a whole new wave of culture. And so just look at us as partners. We need your help desperately, and I think you're going to see us be more willing partners going forward.
Related to that, that's about working alongside. Being advocates is also tremendously important, but being advocates in a spirit of partnership is a really important way to approach it.
I'd say watch for state opportunities. We're reconsidering telework, so even if you don't live, in the DMV area, we'll be hiring. I found that, having been in all 3 levels of government, it's like the 3 little bears, like not too big, not too small. State government is like just right. So it's really fun. So, come work for us.
2 seconds left. I would just say start where the governor's priorities are. So use that as the entryway and to build some trust and build momentum, and it'll give you the path to expand into other services later too.
Excellent. Thank you all so much for spending time with us this morning. Thank you for being such a wonderful audience, and hope you enjoy your day.